Today I'm going to talk to you about storytelling. My name's Tim Kelly and that's me in the picture there on the right. I'd like to start on a serious note, so here's my pig joke. Well, a man is out taking a stroll in the park. In the distance he sees what he assumes to be a woman taking her dog for a walk. However, as the woman gets nearer, much to his surprise, he sees that instead of a dog on the end of a lead, the woman is actually out walking a pig. Now, that might seem strange enough, but stranger still, the pig is hobbling along on 3 legs. That's a fine looking pig you have there, says the man, curious. Well, the woman looks all abashed and smiles proudly as if the pig were her baby. Isn't he a darling? She replies to the man. Then she bends down, grabs the pig by the ears and rubs the face up against it. Ooh's a pretty little piggy wiggy, she says to the pig. The pig grunts appreciatively. The woman then turns to the man. Humbert is the cleverest pig in history. He's a genius. Humbert can speak 7 languages, including Chinese. He can play 11 different musical instruments, and he's completed the score of Beethoven's Unfinished Symphony. He can compose sonnets and has published a collection of haiku in Japanese. His first novel, We Are Not Swine, won the Man Booker Prize for Fiction, and he's currently working on his follow-up piece, Hog in the Limelight. He can also do differential calculus. With that, the woman bent down and rubbed the pig's ears again. The man was astounded. Wow, that really is some pig, he said in appreciation. Just between you and me, the woman added, standing back up. I consulted Humbert when my marriage was breaking up, and now my husband and I are a happy couple once again. There was a moment of silence whilst the man and woman admired the pig. Finally the man spoke. I hope you don't mind me asking, but why has Humbert only got 3 legs? Well, replied the woman abruptly, you wouldn't eat such a clever pig all at once, would you? Did you like that? That's my pig joke. I'll tell you my duck joke another time. Anyhow, to today. Right, so let's talk about cake. Cake. So what are the staple ingredients? Flour, eggs, butter, I suppose, though I confess I'm not really a gourmet cake maker or any kind of cake maker at all. But as we get onto storytelling, I'd like you to think about baking a cake. And so, with that in your mind, what, we might ask, are the key elements of a good story? In other words, what ingredients must all stories have? Okay, so here's a slide I prepared earlier, and I'd say the key ingredients are setting or settings. There must be a place or places where events can take place. Characters. There must be characters, a hero or heroine, a protagonist if you like, perhaps an antagonist, someone who is against the hero, the villain or the bad guy. Characters the readers or audience can relate to in some way. And this need not necessarily be in a realistic manner. It could be on the level of fantasy, idealization of the self, and so forth. And the character should have a desire, a goal. They must want to get from where they are now to somewhere else. Otherwise there's no story, no plot. Characters need something to drive them and the story forward. There must also be some kind of conflict. And on a structural and practical level, conflict can be thought of as obstacles to reaching that goal. If there are no obstacles, the story resolves itself too quickly. Think about a classic romance. Boy meets girl, boy looks into girl's eyes, she looks back, they fall in love, end of story. Now that's a story, but not a particularly interesting one, nor one that would sustain a 300-page novel or even a 10-page short story. So there must be obstacles, things that prevent the boy and girl from getting together. It could be they get off to a bad start, or the girl plays hard to get, or the boy has a sick mother and so has to stay home and can't go out with the girl, or the girl is offered a job in another town and, being ambitious, chooses to leave the boy. Or it could be the antagonist, to whom the girl is also attracted, because after all, good guys are boring, tempts or entraps her in some way. Now, this isn't just Hollywood. Take the most famous romance of all time by our local bard, Romeo and Juliet. Boy meets girl, falls in love. But that's not the end of the story. What's the obstacle there in Shakespeare's story? Well, most obviously the family, the warring clans of the Capulets and Montagues. So Romeo has to disguise himself to get into Juliet's home. But there are also a host of other obstacles that prevent the lovers uniting. A friend whose death must be revenged, a murdered cousin, an incompetent priest, poisons that are poisons and poisons that only pretend to be poisons, mistaken impressions, a whole host of, in many ways, quite ridiculous plot inventions, which nevertheless make up the most famous love story of all time. So conflict exists as it heightens the drama and challenges the protagonists, but it also acts to extend the narrative via the obstacles the hero must overcome. And you need a resolution, and one that brings together the disparate parts of the narrative and affects the reader, listener or viewer, satisfies the audience in some way, or as in as many ways as possible, emotionally, intellectually and aesthetically. Okay, so who's this? Do you remember this guy? Donald Trump. Yes, already just a bad memory. But here, Trump as what? Well, as my teacher many years ago used to tell me, Kelly, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And the original one-eyed men were, of course, the Cyclopes. And where were the Cyclopes from? Well, there are a number of ancient Greek sources, but most famously, the Cyclops Polyphemus appears in Homer's Odyssey. And here's a painting by Herbert James Draper of another famous scene from the Odyssey. On the left is Odysseus tied to the mast, his men rowing, and the female creatures approaching from the water are, of course, the sirens. So the myth is of the sirens, beautiful female creatures who lured sailors to their deaths. It was said that on hearing their song, men became intoxicated, besotted with love and desire, and would leap from their crafts into the sea and drown. So there's interesting symbolism there. Odysseus, however, being a clever fellow, in order to prevent the sailors falling prey to these original femme fatales, had his men plug their ears with beeswax so that they would be deaf to the song. But Odysseus, ever the curious intellectual, wanted to hear the siren's song, so he had his men tie him to the mast and ordered them to leave him there until the danger was past, no matter what he said. When he heard their beautiful female music, their voices, their utterances, their amorous moans, Odysseus raved and roared to be untied, but his men ignored his ravings. And in this way, Odysseus became the only man ever to hear the siren's song and survive. And the reason I've gone into this little digression on attraction and desire from ancient history is that Homer's epic poem, the Odyssey, is widely regarded as one of the first great works of literature, the archetype on which so much to follow was based. And if we think about it in terms of our parameters, our cake or story ingredients, if you like, then we can say the setting is Ithaca, along with a number of other islands, ships and seas. The main character or protagonist is Odysseus, and protagonist must have a goal, and his is to return home to Ithaca. In relation to conflict, Odysseus must overcome a series of obstacles in order to reach his goal of returning to Ithaca, and these include women who love him or imprison him, Calypso, Circe. He must battle monsters and giants such as the Cyclops and the Laestrygonians. He must also battle with nature and even the gods in the form of wild storms and tempestuous seas. He must overcome his own desire, and he does this with incredible intelligence and craft in relation to the sirens, as I've just described. And when he returns to Ithaca, in order to win back his wife, he must compete with the gang of Penelope's suitors who have taken over his palace in their attempt to wed the husbandless queen. And the resolution? Well, Odysseus takes part in the competition. He strings the bow that no other man can. He shoots an arrow through the holes in the 12 axe heads. More symbolism there, I think. And so he wins the competition before going on to ruthlessly slay all the suitors. And of course, he wins back Penelope. So the hero gets the girl and order is restored to the house of Ithaca. With that, I think it's time for a musical interlude. So sit back and enjoy, and we'll indulge in some analysis afterwards.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't
Okay, from the Odyssey to the Wizard of Oz, from the sublime to the equally sublime. Let's see how our paradigm sticks. I'll pose these as questions to my virtual audience and you can shout your answers to a deaf screen. See if you can beat me to it. So what's the setting or settings? Well, there's Kansas, Munchkinland, the Yellow Brick Road, Oz, and back to Kansas, and one or two more places in between. Who are the characters? Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion. They're the protagonists anyway. There's one or two others. What does Dorothy want? Dorothy wants to return home. What does the Scarecrow want? He wants a brain. What does the Tin Man want? The Tin Man wants a heart. And the Cowardly Lion? The Cowardly Lion wants courage. So, the conflict. Well, the characters must overcome their fears, personified by the Wicked Witch, and complete a difficult task to fetch her broomstick, which was set by the wizard. So, what's the resolution? Our heroes complete the task, they kill the witch, they expose the wizard as a fraud, but via the journey demonstrate the ingenuity, love, courage and imagination they thought they lacked. And Dorothy gets to go home. So, just to recap, stories have settings, places if you like, where the events occur, characters, usually people, but think of Animal Farm or a host of children's stories with animals as heroes, heroines and anti-heroes. Conflict that takes the form of a series of obstacles that prevent the hero or heroine reaching their goal. And finally, a resolution. We'll call this whole development action or plot for the moment. In other words, stories are people in places doing things that cause conflict and move the narrative to an end that hopefully will satisfy all the internal story elements and also the reader. So what about theme? People like me, that is, teachers and writers about storytelling, often add theme to this mix. And of course, stories have themes. The writer is writing about something which is of interest, has meaning or purpose to him or her, takes place in a social context, has a social function, i.e. affects other people and so on. But this is a problematic area because as often as not, theme is a matter of hermeneutics, that is, of interpretation, something the reader or critic imposes on the story rather than necessarily being a matter of conscious authorial intention. In other words, if you think of the baking analogy I used earlier, theme might be something like cream. The producer, the author, the baker can use it as one of the ingredients. You can mould your story cake around it. Or the consumer, the reader, critic or eater can slap it on, pour it on afterwards. In fact, if you think about it, our cake analogy can be stretched a little further. We could pose the question, what is genre? Genre, we could argue, is not a key ingredient as such, in the way that setting, character and conflict are. No, genre is the difference between, say, chocolate or lemon or cherry cake. They all have the key ingredients, but they have a different flavour, something extra added, and the ingredients are mixed in different ways. So, cake, the perfect analogy. I had a philosopher friend who told me that cake pretty much solved all the problems in the world. She gave the example of Durkheim's anomie or Marx's notion of alienation. Well, baking a cake is a cure for all that. You are the producer, you take all the ingredients, expend your labour on them, bake the cake, and then you get to eat the fruits of your labour. So cake is not simply something to stuff your mouth with, but is the revolutionary cure for all our ills. Anyhow, enough about cake. So to get back to story, there's one more thing you need to think about, and that is to do with the writing process, with how you go about baking your story cake, if you like. And there's a key choice you have to make as a writer, usually before you put pen to paper, and that is regarding the point of view you are going to write from, or in other words, the narrative form your story takes. And it's this we'll talk about next time.